And with the restaurant, of course, it's constantly a problem. You know, I'm often supposed to try to work a little bit less at night, but I find myself to having to come because somebody's sick, somebody couldn't make it, or somebody decided they don't want to any longer work in hospitality.
Today on Dirty Linen, we are heading to Sydney to talk to Giorgio De Maria. Giorgio is one of Australia's most enthusiastic ambassadors of wine. Italian wine in particular, natural wine is a focus. But I think the reason I wanted to hit up Giorgio for an interview at the moment is because of Paski, your beautiful wine store and eatery in Sydney, just such a welcoming and engaging venue. I want to know everyththing about it. So Giorgio, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thank you so much, Dani. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. I also have to say you're from my favourite part of Italy, Piedmont. So maybe we could, I don't know, where do you want to start? Do you want to just give us a little bit of backstory and then bring us into what you're doing now?
Yes, of course. So I think a curiosity is that I came about to hospitality probably just, it was a pretty casual thing because I used to work in restaurants when I was younger to pay my university. And then I started to, I was studying agriculture. So my destiny was supposed to be a little bit different. But I got to a point where I actually got more into hospitality than agriculture. So when I finished my study with a degree on summer cheeses, by the way, so always food relating, I just abandoned that career and I just got fully immersed into food and wine.
So you've got a degree in cheese. You're saying you're a cheese academic.
Yeah. So my thesis was an experimental thesis about the cheese production. So in Europe, it's in the Alps especially, it's quite common that to bring animals, so cows, goats, and sheep, in altitude during the summer season when it's warmer and when there is no snow, to make really beautiful cheeses that taste quite different from the winter production. And so my thesis was the first stage of recognizing a DOP, so a protected appellation for cheeses in this part of Piemonte.
Beautiful. My goodness, it just makes me want to eat cheese in Piemonte immediately. But I mean, obviously there's so much synergy between cheese and wine. It's about the land, it's about fermenting. But yeah, tell us about how hospitality reeled you in and how it brought you to Australia. Yeah,
so basically I was supposed to, so basically what happened was after my degree, I worked in my in my industry. I worked for the government for some projects in agriculture, but I ended up to find them quite boring. And so I decided to leave Italy. And that was when I was 28. So it's, I think, if I'm not wrong, it's 17 years ago now. And so I left Italy and I decided to go to Ireland because at the time I couldn't speak any English. Not that I made many progresses, but at least now I hope people can understand me. But I left Italy. I went to Ireland to work in restaurants. And after that, I had the opportunity to come to Australia just through like a working holiday visa. It was just for a while. So I planned 3 years worth of hospitality work around the world. So I worked in Japan for about 11 months before coming to Australia. And then I was supposed to go to LA and New York as well. I already had a few propositions lined up, but I ended up to stay here because I fell in love for a small little place in Surrey Hills at the time called Vini. and that's so I started to work there, and we started to import a little bit of wine, and here we are. I'm still here.
So at Paski, you combine your retail. I mean, you import some of the wine, you combine the retail and the hospitality. Can you tell me about combining those things?
Yes. So the news as well is, and probably you don't know this, but the news is that so when we opened, we were selling the wines retail because obviously all these law to facilitate restaurant for COVID. We already had a plan to upgrade our license to what originally was, which is a hotel license. But we had a very strong opposition by council and few businesses around us. And so we had decided for the time being to drop the retail part. So we're looking at potentially doing a bottle shop in a place just very near to us. But right now we have dropped that plan because it was made a little bit more complicated than what it should be. And so at the moment, we are just operating as a wine bar downstairs and a restaurant upstairs.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So you can't buy a bottle of wine to take away?
No, not anymore. So it was after. So I'm not sure why, but this area had obviously a bad reputation for a long time. So there has been restrictions on all the license. We already managed to get rid of the obligation of having security, which would have made the whole place a little bit awkward, as you can imagine. But we already applied, even before opening, we applied for reinstate the original license, which is a fully hotel license, which would could allow us to do retail in the same space as a restaurant. But unfortunately, the council opposed very strongly. I don't know why. They probably didn't understand what we wanted to do, so they want us to do a new DA, and it's a quite complicated and expensive process, as you can imagine. So we have decided for the time being to just work on the bottle shop and restaurant, and there may be an opportunity to actually do the shop very close to where we are, but at the moment still in the air. Sorry to disappoint everyone on this one.
Oh, well, it's very disappointing, but it also speaks to, I suppose, the sort of the bluntness of some of those licensing laws, where you just think, well, no one is going to buy, a bottle of, I don't know, like Sicilian natural wine and then go and, create a riot on the street. It's you can sort of these licensing laws that seem designed to, I suppose, prevent alcohol-fueled violence coming out of beer barns or whatever, places that are operating on a large scale, super late at night. It just seems like, one size doesn't necessarily fit all when it comes to these kinds of restrictions.
Yes, look, like I still, obviously coming from Europe, I still really struggling with the mentality around alcohol, because, it seems to me that, we just play on kind of forbidding things, and then in the other hand, actually, though, kind of contributing to bad habits at the same time. In a certain perspective, for example, there is some drinks that are sold in bottle shop that, they shouldn't be sold, like when you have like caffeine and alcohol in the same drink. So there is no really distinction between good alcohol and bad alcohol. So I understand that alcohol is alcohol, but what we do is also more about culture, and it's more about drinking well, and also, to be honest, kind of drinking less, because the two things are related. Drinking for the pleasure of enjoying the flavor of a bottle of wine, which, very often satisfy you, is not for the It's not for the need of getting drunk or ingesting more alcohol than normal.
Yeah, it's such an interesting distinction and so well made. You're absolutely right. There is so much alcohol that it does seem to be sold for the purpose of, it's just simply writing yourself off or partying super hard, like those caffeinated drinks, which seem very gross. But let's talk about the good stuff and what draws you into wine, Giorgio, and why you're so passionate about it and about, I guess, opening some of these wine worlds up to people who don't know as much about it as you do. Like, what is it that keeps you engaged with wine?
Well, for me, it's like it's the approach to different flavors. So how this wine can be all extremely different. They can reflect so much, not just where they're from, which is obviously, important, but even most importantly, they reflecting the people that are producing them. And in regards to the one I work with, we're talking about family business, sometimes very small, sometimes tiny production, where these producers are doing everything themselves, and their character comes through the wine. And this is what I find extremely exciting. Obviously, for me, Japan was an incredible experience that kind of opened a little bit more my eyes about this, both for food and wine. So I find, first of all, I found a lot of similarity between Japan and Italy, because if you go to Italy, or the same way when you go to Japan, you may travel like 30K away and you find a place with a completely different specialty. You find, when I was in Japan, I was able to try, some minuscule prawns coming from a remote island near Hokkaido, and that you can only find them in that specific location. And it's the same thing with Italy. There is some products that are limited to a very specific village. And obviously, this is producing very unique flavors. So when you're searching for unique flavor, when you're searching for diversity, I think there is no reason why you couldn't like these wines.
Yeah, it's so interesting that comparison between Japan and Italy. And one thing that I wasn't aware of until I interviewed a sommelier from Carlton Wine Room, actually, is just the strength of the wine culture in Japan, just in terms of appreciating wine. And apparently people line up at wine stores when a particular vintage is coming out. So that's sort of, I guess it's that enthusiasm and appreciation for the artisan, which is a thread that really runs through the two cultures.
Exactly. Well, I think this is coming from the culture around food. It's a little bit what I explained before. So in Japan, there is this maniac research for a specific product, because they all have a specific flavor that comes from that product, that place, and the people that are producing it. And it's an obsessive thing, really, but it's also preserving heritage, history, and artisanality. So, in a certain extent, France is also like that. There is a series of laws as well to protect food product that doesn't really exist in any other part of the world. So I think when you are so attentive to flavor, that's how you get so much interest in wine that are all tasting so distinctively. And this is why the success. So this is why I think that, Japanese, they were the first people to import massively wine, natural wine into Japan, even in times where the wines also often were not exactly right, because when you ferment something naturally with no preservative, there is always a batch that from time to time doesn't go in the right direction. And also it's something that the cleanliness and the purity comes as well a little bit with experience, in my opinion, when you're working in this kind of environment. And, and there are producers that are now super iconic here in Australia that 20 years ago, nobody would ever buy it. They didn't even know what it was. And in Japan was already a strong market.
So, I mean, you know, as you've alluded to, there has been a lot of, I guess, development in the world of natural wine, both in the way it's being made and, I guess, controlled or trammeled, or, you know, the techniques have improved, but also the way it's being appreciated by consumers. Like, can you talk about that journey for yourself? Like, what was it that made you focus on this part of the wine world, and how has it been sort of communicating that to people who are interested in drinking wine?
Yeah. So once again, I tried some Italian natural wine back when I was in Japan for the first time. I've seen some wine that I never seen in Italy before. And in fact, some of these wine were going pretty much all just to Japan at the time. And so I was able to try things that I didn't even know they existed. So the first thing I did before starting to import, I gave myself 3 months and I went back to Italy. And this was already when I was already few months in Australia. I went back to Italy for 3 months and I basically traveled all regions of Italy, tried to go and find all this wine that I tried in Japan, and obviously slowly kind of researching a combination of regionality and people that are making natural wine. So I research and educate myself about the different wine region, which so far I only studied in books, but and of course I visited few wine regions near me or even in France in the past. But this trip was extremely important and was organized very systematically. So I went and looked at many wine regions, and then I went and looked at many producers that are making wines in this way. And that's the way I started. And, once again, once I started to want to taste wine with this depth and diversity, it was very hard for me to go and drink pretty generic and commercial wine.
And then then you thought, okay, more other people need to try this wine, and you wanted to bring it back to Australia?
Yes, pretty much. Also because at the time there was very little of those wines imported, so it was also, I could see like a great opportunity to get them over here, and it's just also exciting. You know, it was something completely new. I just, without even thinking, I just thought, I didn't even think about if people would have liked them or not. I just thought it was so interesting to start a journey like this, because I was very impressed by how Australian customers were approaching the restaurant experience. Like in Italy, very often when I worked on the floor there, the customers comes and, you know, they always think they know everything. There is not much of exchange at the time anyway. Things may have changed. When I was working in this little restaurant in Surrey Hills, people were coming and they were extremely curious. So there was an incredible drive in actually educating themselves about the food from Italy, and Vinny was doing a great job in that regards. And so I just thought was a perfect combination of offering something so specific when there are people that are actually interested to suck that information up.
Yeah, that sounds so satisfying. And so was Vin followed by 121 BC?
Yeah, so 121 BC came a little bit later. So Vinny was a restaurant that existed when I came to Australia, and I started to work there for shift, and then I got involved to import some wine for the restaurant And then the group opened Berta, which was a really beautiful restaurant already in the city where now Alberto is. And then 121 BC just around the corner, which was the bottle shop wine bar, which at the time was extremely successful because was offering an overwhelming selection of Italian wines, and everybody was just amazed to come there and explore. And I don't think in more than 4 years working at 121 BC, I don't think many people ever picked something from the menu. They always ask me what to drink, which is quite amazing.
What did it feel like for you, and what does it still feel like that, you learned so much about Italian wine culture from overseas, had to go back to go on that discovery journey, and then you're sort of an ambassador for it here. I mean, what does it feel like to be that person? Yeah, well, it feels great because you said something very true. Like I wasn't traveling Italy that much, and I wasn't discovering things enough in Italy when I was living in Italy. You kind of give it for granted, and so it's actually an empowering, such an empowering feeling. And there's not much about Italy. It's about, in general, about sharing a discovery. I find it incredibly fascinating when I travel to find new things. So I'm not obsessed about countries. Like I'm Italian. I love Italy, but and I am an ambassador of Italian wines and food. But at the same time, I feel more like I'm a citizen of the world. Like it's and I can see how exciting is the experience of discovering something which could be anywhere and make it accessible to other people that share your interest. I love that because, I think the more specific you get with food or with wine, with lots of different things, really, it's like the more you can go so deep that you get to something universal. And I think maybe that's what I love about Paski. I've only been 2 times, once downstairs, once upstairs, but I think I love that feeling of joy that's threaded through that, introducing people to different worlds. And it's like, I suppose the thread that runs through it is there's a thread of connection and discovery. And it does feel a bit like you do become a bit of a citizen of the world through this very specific experience. Exactly. Also because, since a couple of years, so actually probably more, 3 years now, I started to travel other countries and importing other products. And, sometimes I have to kind of calm myself down a little bit because, when I go and travel and I found things that I like, I just want to import everything. But, I think everyone here, all the stuff, and obviously also Enrico and Mattia, who are my partner in business, we all share the same feelings. So Enrico just got back to Italy yesterday, and he was eating around Italy to find new recipes, to find new dishes. When I go and travel, I always make sure that in my schedule there is always time to go in places. I'm concentrating not much on fine dining because I don't think it's the strength of Italian food, but I'm concentrating in small historical restaurants that are cooking with very fresh and local produce. And there is some recipes that are just amazing. And there is so much out there, and there is so much to discover. I don't feel I am anywhere near to have discovered enough about Italy. Could you just take me to a little restaurant? Just tell me about somewhere that you went recently that had that really enveloped you and excited you. Yeah, of course. So
again, it's a restaurant very much related to a person. And so he's a chef called Carmelo Chiaramonte. And he's in Sicily, he's in Scicli. The restaurant is in Scicli. It's open only in the summer months. He normally lives in Mount Etna. But I went there, I swing by to say hello. I actually went there in the afternoon. And so the restaurant wasn't even open, but we just started to talk, and he basically cooked me 2 or 3 courses while we were talking. And he makes he's obsessed with the history of the Mediterranean. So he's studying a lot citrus. So he's studying all the citrus that you can find in the Mediterranean. He's fermenting them. He's doing things with them. And then he's also very obsessed with some production that were very typical at Roman time, or even more, even earlier, where that part of Italy was part of Greece. And so he cooked me this dish, which was made with cured tuna sperm, the spermatic sacs of the tuna, cured and cured with animal fat for like about 6-8 months. And then so he used that, and he made a very simple pasta by using some almonds and using some bergamot. So everything from the Mediterranean. And for me, that dish was just incredible. It was just a combination of flavor that just worked, and it just really blew my mind.
It sounds amazing. So is the cured tuna sperm sacs, is it sort of like botarga in a way?
Yeah.
So quite dry, and then is it shaved into the pasta?
Yeah, it's not as dry as botarga, but it's a little bit softer than botarga, but it's got that kind of consistency. And it was just, I think it's also a product that you find a lot on history books. So it's something that was so common. So making all this product from drying fish, so from colatura di alici or colatura from any fish, really any fish sauce, was extremely common at those times. And it's trying to rediscover all these very old tradition and obviously bring them up in a more current way. But yeah, every time I go and see him, it's just it's just an incredible journey, because he's you go to his house and there is thousands of jars with things fermenting in it, and you want to try this, and he brings up a known citrus that is being pickled, or almonds that have been fermenting, and also using different phases from the fruit to the flower. So I think this is the things that, especially in cuisine, I'm very much now into.
Oh, just sounds so good, like so rich and timeless, but also contemporary. I really need to go there as well. So how do you translate this sort of passion and interest and, I guess, heritage into the food that you're doing in Sydney? So
obviously, with a lot to do with the food is pretty much Enrico's input. But we are all on the same page when we are thinking of what to offer here, which is we don't want to be messing around too much with the food. We don't want to make things that are maybe very tasty and rich, but not super traditional. We're going to try to offer dishes that have very few ingredients. We will focus a lot on the ingredients, and this is obviously something that requires time. So obviously we're trying to source as much as we can local ingredients for whatever can be sourced around here, and obviously there is some ingredients that they're not replicable here. So from olive oil, like I love Australian olive oil, but I still think that it's very hard to find olive oil with the same quality of some olive oil you can find in Italy. And again, I think it's a lot to do, once again, with just time and experience, because the products here are fantastic. And there is more and more incredible stuff coming out, but with certain ingredients like olive oil or for example, some cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano or some prosciutto or even some fish sauce, it's very hard to find them here, so we have to source them from Italy. And also because some of this product can only be produced there, obviously, because they're protected. So let's not forget about that. There is a big difference between Parmesan and Parmigiano Reggiano, which is an appellation, protected appellation, where you can only make it with a certain breed of cow in a specific area, and blah blah blah. But the idea is, this one is to offer something authentic, with good ingredients and simplicity. Like, I think, this is what I appreciate most in Italian cuisine. And Enrico is a fantastic chef, is incredibly creative. So sometimes he loves Japanese food, sometimes he's trying to go a little bit on different lines, and I love what he does, but sometimes I have to tell him, let's remember what we said about the food we want to offer you.
Sure. So your chef Enrico Tomelleri, we should mention his name, give him a shout out. And so if I was coming in, let's say for one snack and one glass of wine, and you just really wanted to showcase something that you guys do, what would you feed me?
Well, so we could probably give you, I think there is this dish which is a good example, because it's a combination of something existing and something that it's a little bit improvised. So it's a combination between two dishes. So it's called papala, which is also, the name is a fantasy name. So if you go to Italy, don't go around and ask for papala, because you only find it at Paski in Sydney. And it's basically a combination of bacala and papal pomodoro. So bacala is salt cod, so salted cod, which is being cooked in a very Venetian way. So Enrico Tomelleri is from Verona originally, so it's from Veneto. And so the salt cod is cooked in milk. And the papal pomodoro, it's more of a Tuscan dish, which is just a very simple bread and tomato salad. And this is a combination of both. So it comes out as nearly like a paste that you spread on more bread, of course, and is obviously extremely salty, savory, but also very refreshing. And also it's also slightly fermented, so there is that acidity coming from fermentation, and with something like that, we will probably offer you. We have a couple of options. We have we were pairing that with more in summertime. We were pairing that with an amazing savory pink lambrusco, or maybe now that it's a little bit colder, we'd probably still pairing it with a white, but something a little bit richer from Sicily, from. Especially, there is a wine in particular from this producer called Baracco, which is near Marsala, where the vineyard is growing on a dune of sand. So if you go in the vineyard, you're basically walking like on a beach. So you are on full sand, and it feels quite amazing.
Oh my goodness. I was actually hoping you'd talk about the papala because I think that is such a spirited and fun dish, like super tasty, but yeah, has a real story. And of course, yeah, every wine's got a story as well.
I just wanted to add as well that this dish is also great because it's a dish where kind of all of us had an input. So the actual idea of this dish was more Mattia, Mattia is the third partner, Mattia Dicati, who also imports wine and imports the same kind of producer that I work with. And because he saw this variation with a little bit of tomato into the bacala, and so he gave Enrico the idea of making something with tomato, and Enrico came up with this papala, with a combination of two iconic dishes that from Italy, Papa Pomodoro from Toscana and Baccalà Mantecato from Veneto.
I love that because it's got a sense of humor. It's really, spirited. It's got that heritage, but it's also very modern. And it sort of feels like something that really, it's very Australian to be able to have that freedom to pluck something from a region and then from another region where, often those different places would be very parochial about their own cuisine. So yeah, it feels like a very Sydney dish as well as being anchored in that Italian history. Giorgio, we've been talking a lot on this podcast recently about some of the issues in hospitality, and staffing and costs are the big ones that keep coming up for people. I've been hearing a lot from sommeliers and wine program managers about some of the issues around wine importing and that things have got really expensive and tricky. I mean, how is all that stuff for you?
Yeah, it's it's all true and very sharp on every field you mention. So at the moment I must admit I am struggling a lot because the day starts very early and finishes very late, and there is not much time for myself. So I've been promising myself to slow down. It's probably 10 years I'm saying that, and it just keeps getting worse. So in terms of importing, just to give an example, so there is two main issues. One is the cost, of course, which increase, in my experience, increased more about 60%, the cost of shipping from Europe. And in the other hand, there's also the delay. And the fact that now you just have to be fine with it. You can't, if they tell you there is a delay because there is not a container, this is the normality, If something like that would happen 5 years ago, you would, everybody would be extremely sorry and, everybody would try not to make it happen again. But now it's just the normality. It's and it's extreme. I'm just sorry for some people that may have just started, because if I was a new business and if I had to pay like I do most of my wine up front, and then having to wait 4 or 5 months until I can actually start selling it, it would be extremely hard. So thankfully, I've been doing this few years, and I am in in a healthy cash flow situation where I can kind of just go through this. But like, to give an example, one of my latest shipment was all pay and ready to be picked up at the beginning of March, and there was no container coming to Australia. So my shipping company could not find a container, and the first container available was on the 29th of May. So it's like March, April. So it's 3 months just to find a container. And then there is 5 weeks for the shipping. And then sometimes with some delays. So it's very hard to work like that. But, as any other industry, this is the normality now. There is nothing anybody can do apparently, and so we just need to work around it. And with the restaurant, of course, it's constantly a problem. You know, I'm often supposed to try to work a little bit less at night, but I find myself to having to come because somebody's sick, somebody couldn't make it, or somebody decided that they don't want to any longer work in hospitality. Because I've been seeing a lot of that. I've been seeing a lot of people saying I've been offered a daytime job, and I just don't feel like working nights anymore. It's quite common and understandable.
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, especially when you're also would rather not be working nights or not every night. It's really hard to begrudge people that lifestyle change.
Yeah, and also with a broken foot. I'm still working the floor, but just a bit slower.
Oh, Giorgio, it does not sound ideal to have a broken foot and still be, up and down the stairs and working in the restaurant. That's really tough. I mean, what do you see as the way forward? I mean, it's a big question, but I mean, how can we reconcile these quite reasonable desires people have for a lifestyle balance with the people also wanting to go and drink wine in the evening?
Well, I think so. The only way, so there is two ways, and I've seen more and more people doing kind of restricting their hours, reducing their opening hours, or like closing an extra day, which is, completely understandable. But I would prefer not to have to do that because I still love, I think this is affecting the meaning and the essence of restaurants and places to go out. It kind of brought it to a point where everywhere you go, you have to book. There is nowhere to go. If you want to go somewhere on a Monday or Tuesday lunch, good luck to find a place to go. It's all extremely challenging, and this, in a way, it's against the spirit of hospitality. I used to love. There was a lot, example, Fratelli Paradiso was open in Sydney, was open breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For me, it was just an institution, and I love places like that. I love that model, but I just think at the moment it's pretty much impossible for everyone to make that happen. And the only other solution to it is that hopefully we get maybe some more people from overseas that are willing to work in this job. And in all honesty, I already went and started to talk to people that are living overseas to see if they're willing to come here for a while, because there is no one here. Or anyway, there is obviously people here, but there is not that many that are choosing to do this as a job.
Mm. And what was the response? Were people, because I feel like Australia's reputation as a place for overseas work has been trashed a little bit over the past 2 years. Do you feel like people are willing to come back to Australia or visit or come to Australia and work for the first time?
Well, I think so. I think Australia has always been especially for I don't know why, but even myself, like the first time I came to Australia, I was 18, and every person you talk to in Italy, pretty much, or even friends, everybody has this dream to go to Australia. So I don't think that has changed much, despite things that have happened. But the response was positive. I've been talking to a couple of people that may be able to come, but again, they are already engaged with other businesses, so it will take a little while, as it's right. Obviously, I would appreciate if somebody that works for me, if they decide to move on, I always appreciate to give me a little bit of time to kind of set myself up again. But yeah, look, the response has been good, so I'm probably going to be able to get a couple of people from overseas. But, like when we opened, we basically had no staff. So I had to ask a friend who was living in Melbourne and ask another friend who was living in Tasmania. And that's how we opened this place in November, because otherwise we really couldn't find anybody here.
Well, it's just tough all round. Giorgio, I hope things improve in terms of your foot and your staffing and getting the wine off the boats. But thank you so much for chatting to us today. It's just great to get a bit of the backstory and, hear all the passion and thought that goes into what you do. Really, really appreciate what you're doing for the hospitality scene in Sydney.
Thank you so much, Dani. It's so nice to talk to you.
Thank you. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.